Yeah, we could discuss that, have a meeting of the large group. Systems practical.
Good. Sam? No. Yeah. Give me 1 second. I was actually. So let me do this. I want to. I'm not sure that everybody knows the agenda. So let me start with that. The agenda was attached to the invite. So because it is a public meeting, obviously we set it up as such. So what I was going to do is just kind of a recap of what we discussed. As Brian just referenced, there were basically three not proposals, but concepts put on the table during the last meeting. At the same time, we kind of went through a financial overview of how we got where we are as far as the LFRA, some of the financial contributions and changes of the dynamics of the organization from basically a volunteer part-time to a career-based organization. Looking at this, so the key factors that I had put out before for discussion was to maintain or improve current service levels. I think we all are in agreements there that we have to do that. We've got to maintain those services or improve upon them if the ability is there. At the same time, financial resiliency for both the LFRA and all of our contributors. Obviously, that's the city as well as the Rural Fire Protection District. And then the goal, somehow, some way, to kind of lessen some of the frustration is to find financial parity for all taxpayers. Now, obviously, the lead in there is that is a district, because that is everybody paying 100%. But is there another variable that can be put forth to create that financial parity? And then my ask as the fire chief is to create organizational functionality. I think that is incredibly important. While the governance model of the authority has worked, and I'm not suggesting that it doesn't work. It is a tough governance model. There are a lot of bosses and a lot of report outs that have to be made. Having said that, if that's the continuance, then obviously we manage that. Now, the initial options for discussion that were put forth was a transition from authority to a fire protection district. Some of those limitations that we've talked about is voter interaction, as well as we got to be considerate of what potentially is on the ballot as well, whether it be a city-driven ballot issue, a school district, or anything else that is out there. That makes it very complicated. At the same time, retain the fire authority model with a revised financial formula was another point of discussion that we put forth. The third being a expanded fire authority model. So when we said that expanded authority model represented, as we have two contributing parties now, the city and the rural, the model that we discussed was the potential for 4 contributors, so 2 additional partners coming into play. And then the fourth option we didn't discuss at the time, Brian asked that we add this to the agenda, was to basically dissolve the LFRA / the IGA. So what I'd like to do is just kind of open it up for just general conversation as to what we feel are obtainable and what we really need to do collectively as a group as far as our continued push in that direction. So maybe prioritizing what is the most realistic and what's the time frames that we can connect to them. So I'll kind of open the floor and go from there.
So are you going to be the person who address comments to and ask questions to moderator?
I'll be the moderator because I'm Switzerland. I'm the guy in between. So.
Okay, I'd like to ask people to raise their hands and you acknowledge them so we're not stepping on each other.
Go ahead.
Yeah. You're talking about a divorce, it sounds like. I don't remember these conversations. Sounds like, Brian, is this something you're asking for or you just want as a conversation?
I think Jim mentioned this in our last meeting, which Brian wasn't there, so that's why I'm responding and Brian's not. But Jim had said there's always the option of, so we just wanted to make sure that that stayed on the list.
This is the city's position. I'm not,
You're recommending it? Is that what you're doing?
no,
No, just.
Okay, I'm asking, don't get upset, please.
I think that was the idea.
Yeah.
And I have another question. So this has become a public meeting, is that correct? Jim just sent an email saying, hey, Jim's not coming because he doesn't want to create the quorum.
Oh.
So this is
I
the
love it.
quorum now.
Yeah, yeah.
This was supposed to be the finance subcommittee meeting, not a public meeting. So my understanding was Mayor Marsh, Commissioner Marsh, and Commissioner Bukowski were going to be here. And that's why Jim said, I'm not coming. Now Chair Swanee is here. This has become a public meeting, and this isn't the finance subcommittee anymore.
Brian, this was my point exactly when you and I had this conversation, is this is the difficulty. When we said we were,
You and I had a conversation about Molly attendance.
I get it. And here's exactly what we talked about, is what I offer the city as an opportunity to bring folks forward. I have to offer equally such to the rural. And your point, your statement to me was the rural can bring anybody they want. So they just brought anybody they wanted. And that's where we stand.
We should have known this was going to happen.
I said, this is exactly what was going to happen. It's exactly what I told you.
You never told me explicitly this was going to become a public meeting.
I literally said those exact words.
Why are we concerned that it's a public meeting? I mean,
My concern, as the fire chief,
what is Brian's concern, I guess? Why are you concerned it's a public meeting?
Because we have a quorum of the board here,
And
and this was supposed to be a subcommittee meeting. And our city manager didn't come because our understanding was this is a subcommittee meeting, not a functional meeting of the LFRA board. This has become a meeting of the LFRA board.
it's still a subcommittee meeting just because I happen to be here.
And
We
there's-
posted it. I asked the chief to post it at our last meeting, so we've met all the legal requirements, but I don't see how my presence here is hurting this meeting in any way. I'm happy to leave if that makes you more comfortable, Brian.
It's that or Jim being notified that, hey, it's an LFRA board meeting now. Do you want to be there?
There's
Good
no
point.
action gonna be taken, right?
No.
It's the equivalent of a study session.
so the other side of Jim was here, it would be an LFRA board meeting as well. Jim is an LFRA board member.
This is like, it's
No.
like Groundhog Day.
We get
I
that.
know, that's why he's not here, Tim. Because it was just supposed to be Mr. Bukowski or Commissioner Bukowski and Commissioner Marsh.
May I speak?
Christie?
Sure.
So what sparked the discussion about this being a public meeting was when you forwarded the meeting to Jim. And then I had to call Janelle and see if he was going to come, which he said he was yesterday. So it was a public meeting to us as soon as the meeting invitation was forwarded to Jim because he is a board member. And then we had to have the conversation with Janelle and see if he was accepting, and she said he was. So, to our knowledge, this was a public meeting even before we walked in the door.
No, I didn't forward it to Jim. Nor did I ever intend for him to get here, but somehow it got,
There was a forward notice that got sent to us that it was forwarded to Jim and Vince from your.
I must have been talking to them about it, my intent for them to attend, so.
I asked this innocently. I don't know. Is Jim out there now? I saw his name up there a minute ago.
He's on
No.
the invite.
He just was invited. He has not attended. He hasn't joined.
Okay, qualifying question here. If he were to participate, is it then a public meeting if one of us
Anytime. there are
participates
three
even?
or
Yeah.
more.
There's three of us.
Okay, I'm just,
Yeah.
whether we're here in person or not, correct?
Correct.
While I don't want to kick this ball down the road, I do think that there are conversations that don't necessarily have to be at this time based on strategic partnerships and those type of discussions. I think we need to slow roll this, reset the deck and relaunch the meeting. Probably with very specific invitees, not to be forwarded or extended beyond that. And go from there.
I think that addresses the concerns, right? I'm okay with that.
For me, like I said, just the fact that it's a public meeting, we weren't anticipating that, and how it got there is, we can just either proceed on this, though I guess I would just give Jim a call and say, hey, do you want to be on this? Because now it's a public meeting. But I don't want to kick it down the road. I would love to meet today, talk through all the stuff so we can keep moving. But at the same time, I would be remiss if I didn't address my boss and say, hey, by the way, the meeting isn't what we thought it was.
If I could, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and I understand wanting, equal representation and everything. I think in our minds it was if rural wanted to bring someone else, like a finance person, that we're totally welcome to have a finance person from rural.
That's Sarah and Troy.
Okay, so I think that's what we were thinking would happen. And the reason why Brian wanted me to be here and why I want to be here is if I'm supposed to be his backup for when he's not around, but I haven't been in any of the meetings, how do I provide that backup without knowing?
Well, nobody's, and I told
And I'm just
Brian
trying to
this, I have
provide background.
No, that makes sense.
no issue.
Well, we had a back and forth about it. You had said she's not intended to come, but if she does, the rural's gonna bring another person. To which I said, okay, the rural can bring whomever. And I should have said, but keep in mind, we don't want it to be a public meeting. I guess I didn't go that deep. I didn't anticipate that the rural.
I literally said, this is gonna become a public meeting based on the configuration of what we have. I literally said that.
You said you didn't want it to become a public meeting.
Well, I was trying to avoid that, but to your point, we wanted Jim. Okay, the invite was extended to Jim, and to my knowledge, Jim was gonna be here. I had a conversation over the weekend with Paul about it, not a weekend, earlier this week, about Jim coming to this.
So you invited him.
I did not invite Jim. I
So sorry.
confirmed Jim's attendance based on the forwarded email from you.
That might be where it got muddled.
Can we have a discussion on the pros and cons of each of these four, and you let us know when it's a sticky wicket, stay away from that? I mean, I'm here. I'd like to,
Of
Yeah,
course, no, nobody wants.
I get that we may not be able to go into some topics,
Yeah,
but at least, for me, number 4 is ruled out. Dissolving is, in my mind, not an option, but.
If I could, Brian, if we can have exactly what Mayor Marsh said, just if there's some stuff that we don't want to go to, we go, let's not talk about that right now, because we don't want to get in the weeds on that. I'm okay with that as well, make some progress here and then regroup and discuss who should be, so
Yeah.
we're all in agreement.
Sure, and if you guys, I really appreciate that, Commissioner Bukowski, and if you're okay with it, if we could just adjourn for like 5 minutes,
And
let me
Jim
let
join.
Jim know that,
Sure.
hey, you can join now, because again, in his email,
Yeah.
it says, don't want this to become a public meeting or don't want there to be quorum. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah,
No,
let's take a
I appreciate my
5-minute
position.
recess.
That's fair.
Yeah, let's take a
Thank you.
5-minute recess, let Jim know that this is open. And we'll, everybody get a cup of coffee or a bottle of water.
I don't need any more.
Sarah and
No,
Troy, are you?
we're up all night anyway now.
I'm wired now.
Yeah, you're wired now.
We're gonna take a
Just drink some.
5-minute recess.
Yeah.
I just saw your comment.
I told him, don't text or call me in the middle of the night when you can't sleep.
Like I
at night.
normally do.
What we had originally proposed was a transition to a fire district with a May of 2025 inclusion election. So that would have been city residents, including or coming into a rural fire protection district. Obviously, any transition to a district requires city voters. In its current form, with the fire protection district already established, there would be a millage of 11.186 that would go hand in hand with that. The city would need to provide a portion of their 9.56 mills and subsidize the balance. Or city gives a portion of the 9.56 mills, voters approved to pay the balance, whatever that might be. I had thrown out an example, solely an example, just because it was the exact millage increase that was asked of the rural. So I put out the example of, say they give 8.77 mills, there would need to be a balance of 2.41 mill increase. That was literally just set as an example. So that's the fire protection district.
And the challenge is the voter approved. Is there any other challenge besides voter approved to that model?
And Jackie, if I could add on to your question,
I mean,
at no time, because there was some confusion on my side, we're not asking for the entire millage, right? I mean, that's not happening, obviously not happening.
No.
And it's not, we haven't asked for it, is that correct?
We haven't what?
We have not
We have not.
requested that. Okay, I just want to make sure.
And I think even talking about, I know you just threw it out as an example, but it makes the city very nervous to consider anything significant from that millage, simply because then we're on that one-legged stool that we've talked about. So that makes it challenging. We don't want to stand in the way of a district. And if you guys were to say, we're going to go out and ask for the full 11 mills, fantastic. We can see, you know, but I mean, for us to
pay my house payment, go for it.
But I mean, truly, for us to give up our mills when then we'd only be standing on sales tax. That's a concern that Jim has. That's a concern that we have. It's not just coming from finance.
But please be clear, never, not once. Have we asked for that? The discussion was for Dylan and Dalton to tell us the downstream effects of what that is.
And just so we're all being transparent and communicating effectively. Every time I say something, you're like, we're not, I'm just sharing our perspective. I'm not trying to say, you guys did this or you guys did that. I'm just saying, here's what the city thinks.
I'm not trying to be confrontational.
I'm certainly speaking for myself, maybe not the rural board as a whole. We have never pushed for a district. We agreed to become a district because of the authority's position. And the authority's position was basically pushed on us by the city manager and 2 city councilors. We're 40% of the authority. So we basically went out of our meeting a couple of years ago saying, let's all carry the same message. Let's go out there and say this district's a good thing. I'm not saying it's not a good thing, but all the conversations since then indicate that this will be a monumental hill to climb. The city doesn't want to give up their guaranteed revenue. Looks like probably in taxpayers' mind are looking at an increase. The rural is not going to increase our tax base no matter what. So, I mean, if you think about it, whether we're a district or whether we're a rural, we're going to keep paying the same dollar amount. But we've kind of been put in a position, and I'm speaking for myself, I feel like we've been put in a position of defending the district. And that's not what we're trying to do. All we're trying to do is defend our tax dollars and the taxpayers, saying, here's what we can afford. Here's what we feel is a fair amount to pay on behalf of the rural. So rural people, the rural board, we are not pushing for a district. My choice is an authority. I'm speaking for me individually, but I think probably most board members on the rural feel the same way that I do. There's really no big advantage. The big advantage is, I guess, the chief has one boss rather than 3 bosses. He's not going to all these meetings you know, being asked to be the mailman, so to speak, carrying messages back and forth. He's being caught in the middle. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to go to a district, but that's not our agenda.
And if-
Please understand that.
So I can chime in just 1 second.
I don't want to ever come across as being defensive. That is not my intent. We're not pushing for a district. I think city council needs to know that. Please carry that message back.
So let me expand upon that just a little bit more, because there is more to the advantages of a district. Taxpayer parity is probably at the top of that list, that everybody is paying the same, and it nullifies the argument of I'm contributing more than X, Y, and Z. So I think that's the other thing. The autonomy, that self-independence, it's on us to basically pay the bills and make sure that we have enough money to basically run the organization appropriately. And if need be, it would be upon us to basically seek an increase in the fire district tax in the future. If money was short, that would be on us to go seek that, as opposed to on the city or on the rural.
If I could, getting back to the pros and cons, and you mentioned Dylan and Dalton, they were going to come up with some sort of a metric or where the millage could be. I'm not, have they done that work? Is there any data on that where, you know, where the millage could potentially be, or has that work been done? I don't know, Ryan.
Yeah, that was, you know, the history of the conversation was, you know, the first the plan was, and the city was participating in it as much as the rural and LFRA was, we would look to offset the 11 mil election with foregoing the city's property tax. Then we talked with Butler Snow, and there's a lot of considerations with the existing agreements on property tax and future agreements on property tax. And also, as Molly had mentioned, the city's not comfortable, especially with its, you know, weakened sales tax stream, in giving up its property tax revenue stream. So after that, you know, we looked at things like sub-districts or any other, you know, I think there was a process whereby you can have like 4 Tabor elections in a row to try to memorialize all the different agreements. Like, for example, Centerra North, right? The city's been invested in that for 23 years. We can't just let that revenue kind of not come back to the city. So you need a bunch of Tabor elections to address issues like that. And that seemed to make, you know, any kind of mill exchange, if you will, very, very difficult, if not impossible.
Ryan, if I can just comment on that. You would not need an election for that. The IGA could be written very specifically around the URA. So putting those out there, this was directly from Emily, that she could craft that it would not have to go that way. The other side of that, to your point, she actually even had mentioned that the URA could be filtered through directly back to the city. Now, I don't know the specifics of that. I'm not going to act like I do, but that was a brief discussion, and we had known that the URA would be a point of concern because of the perceived windfall. It was never advocated or suggested that, oh, that would be a windfall for the LFRA. But she's done that multiple times, that, you know, however many URAs or outstanding agreements that are out there, all of those would have to be addressed through some form of written documentation as to how we would form the district and where these monies would go if there are exceptions to the rule.
So getting back to my question, excuse me, Brad. So is there a mechanism, whatever it is in those agreements or from a millage, has any work been done to see what could potentially be brought over? I mean, if the answer is 0, then that's the answer. But if the answer is 4, 5, 2, 3, whatever it is, has any work been done on that so that we're not just sitting here going, well, this is ridiculous? I mean, that's my question.
Well, that would really be a question for the legal subcommittee.
Okay.
Like, what does that look like?
Well, this is finance. We're talking money. So I'm assuming that would be part of what we talked about, right?
Well, right, but we're talking about the URAs and
Okay.
Tabor elections.
Okay. So that we need to answer that then. So you can answer. Okay.
That would be a question for Emily to discuss with
Okay.
Vince and with Butler Snow and legal counsel for the rural, right? So that they could discuss, all right, how would you work through this? I'm no expert in it, but I do know what we were told by Butler is that this would be a very complex series of measures to give the city security in terms of those, you know, those parts of the equation there. So,
So Brian, if you, let's just say hypothetically speaking, those are carved out, okay? However it's done, okay? It's hypothetical. They're carved out. Is there a millage that is in your mind that is potentially acceptable, that we could manage together to put forward?
well, the city does have a negotiating position, which is the city is not going to forego its mills, right? That was
Period.
informed,
Period.
is where it stands now. That was informed, we get negotiation direction from council various ways, and we did receive that direction from council that no, foregoing the mills is not a viable path forward. So that's the city's current position as informed by council.
But is that described as all mills or a portion of
I
it?
would describe that as all mills. So,
No, meaning all 9.56.
yes.
Okay, so take that,
Any mills.
that's,
Zero.
that's the right term.
Right.
They're not willing to give up any mills.
My understanding from council's direction.
Chief, I have a question for Jackie, Brian, Molly. Is there anybody in the city, counselors, staff, anybody that wants a district right now that's pushing for it? My question is, why do we keep having these conversations?
I think we see the advantages of a district, based on what Tim has said and everything, but we're just having trouble figuring out how we'd ever get there.
For me personally, to have sat through a budget workshop, all-day budget workshop, and at the end of the day, know that the police and fire do not either one have all the dollars they need, and we had 500,000 that we could say, okay, police are gonna get 300 and fire's gonna get. I never want to be in that position again. I would like our public safety to be fully funded. So for me, that's how do you get there? And I think right now the 9.1, whatever it is, 9.4, whatever we get, is about 16, 17 million. So it would take all of that plus additional to meet the needs of what, 25, 26 million? Where's the fire?
We're at 20, yeah, they're about 26.
So
Okay, so
the message we have to take back to the city taxpayers, they're going to be paying more money. They need to understand that. Because there's not gonna be an increase on the rural side. And again, we don't have a dog in this fight. We're
Yeah.
good.
No, you guys
But
passed
the
your,
sale has got to come from your
well,
side.
yeah,
I think part of the concern for us is that, so we have the agreement that's the 80-20, but then we talk about taxpayer parity, which I get that argument as well. But if you look at what our citizens are paying in mills, it's actually closer to 12 for fire, 12 and a half for fire safety. So there's like the 80-20, and then there's the parity of taxpayers, and those don't crosstalk.
You didn't have
They
to
don't
explain the
match.
parity taxpayer. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be
Yeah,
smart.
no,
I don't
no.
understand why it would come to 12. How would that be?
So we contribute currently about 18 million towards LFRA. Our 9 point whatever brings in 16 million. So to get to that 18 million, that's about 12 mils. So we're paying more than 11 mils, our community
coming
members,
out of the general.
because it's coming out of the general fund.
It's coming out of sales tax, but if it was to be just a mill levy to supply the city contribution, then yeah, it would be north of 12 mils.
Try to bring us back on track if I could, Tim. We were talking about the district. And Brian, I'd asked you about the mills. So what I'm hearing is it's a donut. There's 0 mills that are going to be coming from the city. A number fine. I just trying to figure it out. But your comment back to me was that the legal group will determine if there's any other monies, any other way of making this happen. Is that kind of where it sits with you?
They can if that's what they want to do. It's not up to me. If the group, if the steering committee says, and again, the LFRA board is here. So if you guys want to say, hey, we're going to direct legal to look into these other options, they can. Again, as far as finance is concerned, we've been informed by council.
Well, and I'm uncomfortable with that statement because we haven't had a public meeting. And I hate to say council is gonna do something or not doing something without hearing all sides and without hearing from. So I'm uncomfortable with saying that's written in stone. I would like to see council have a public discussion.
But council does have a negotiating position that was informed.
Well,
Well, we have a negotiation position that was informed, right?
but were all sides heard?
It was all 9 of you.
Well, no, I'm saying all interest represented. I'm being very careful here.
Okay, so-
For good reason.
Again, I guess.
Yeah, I would hate to say the council set in stone without having done that in a public meeting where we hear from everybody that's interested, including the public. So, because I don't know that they considered all information.
Okay, so,
Yeah, I'm trying to be very
and I think we all know what we're
careful.
dancing around,
I'm
right?
walking on.
No decisions were made. in executive- No decisions were made in
Yeah.
executive session, but we do get strategic guidance as staff. And staff's strategic guidance from council is we're not giving up any mills. Do you agree with that?
I think based on what, again, I have to be very careful here, what council.
I've already said the quiet part out loud.
Discussed, but I don't feel it was a complete discussion.
So it is council's position, but you don't
I
think
think-
it's correct.
I'm not saying I don't think it's correct. I'm saying I don't think it was a full encompassing conversation.
I respect that, but again, that's what puts us as staff in a very awkward position.
Well, I'm
Because
not-
I have
well-
my marching orders, but now
Yeah.
you're kind of my boss and you're telling me.
No, I'm saying
You're saying, I don't
that,
think
I
that's our
think
position.
that before you take a thing that this is council's viewpoint, we need to have a public hearing on it. You know me, I do research, I gather information. It's not, in a closed chamber vacuum. I go out on my own, you know this, right?
Sure, no.
Molly, I investigate. I want to hear from all factions. So for me, my mind isn't made up. About mills, whether it could go to the fire or not.
Sure, but again, that's where, like I was saying,
And I don't know that I can speak for the mayor pro tem or anybody else. In a given meeting, hearing this information was, council, feeling this way, would they feel differently? If another position were heard, I don't know. Or if more
I guess
information was given from a different viewpoint, would they have a different opinion? I don't know.
but that's it's tough to operate that way, right?
I know, I
Like
get
if we
it, I
had a
get it.
meeting where direction was given and then we're like, well, maybe they'll give different direction later. Well, how do you?
I think the other thing that I would
Yeah,
contribute,
I know, I'm trying.
Well, yeah, it's which is, and Madam Mayor, forgive me, but which is
Yeah.
exactly why
Yeah,
we didn't want board members here.
yeah,
So we could proceed, but it gets
Yeah.
very sticky.
yeah, I know it does.
But, no board members are here. It's a public meeting now, which is fine.
I think the other thing that, from a district perspective that, I would throw into consideration is, I get the city's position on the surface. That's a very difficult stance for anybody to accept on the other side, and the fact that it's like, we've got ours, you gotta go get yours. And what I mean by that, and I don't mean that to be adversarial, what I'm saying is that if we were to go after 11.1 mils to create parity with the rural, well, that creates a hell of a windfall for the city, and the burden is 100% on the LFRA membership. And I've said all along, we're willing to fly the flag to a degree. It's very difficult to ask LFRA to take this on their shoulders 100%. And I think we're in this together, and that's what we need to find a way to pursue. So
But we need to find a way to pursue what?
how are we going to do this together to say there are no potential mills on the table? Like right now, you're given 9.56 plus an additional, let's say, 3 million through sales. To basically say there are no mills, that's basically just stripping it back and saying, LFRA, you've got to make the run for a fire district tax of parity to the rural at 11.1 mils. You and I both know, well, let's face reality. And there's nobody we can't pass 0.37% tax, and you're gonna say, let's go to the taxpayers and say, hey, bear the burden of an additional 11.1 mils on top of what you're currently paying. That's not gonna fly.
Question. So I liked your point, Molly, about it's sort of the equivalent of 12-ish mills. Am I thinking about this correctly, that if as the 8 point whatever that you had as an example before, if the city, if council did decide they were willing to give that, and then we had, you know, an election to get up to 11. So then the taxpayers would then be paying 11. That's an actual saving for the people in the community that are now paying 12-ish.
It is, but it doesn't give you the budget you need.
And also,
Because you won't be bringing in, if you only have an 11 mil from the city, 11 mils from the city, you won't be getting what you're getting from us even today. You'd be getting less. I don't know if you guys can function with less.
Right.
No, we have had that discussion. We talked about the 11.1. When we originally had the conversation about the fire safety tax, that's where that number came about. That's how we set the mark of 11.1 for the rural, and then the fire safety tax at 0.37%. So yeah, those days, I mean, we're 2 years removed.
What would the number be, Molly? Do you know?
I actually have it.
And while you're looking at it, if I can say this, at one time, if it was for you even were here, Chief, the number that was out there was 14% was what it would take for city and rural combined to give us the funding that we needed. And I'm not saying that's accurate. I just seem to recall that number.
Yeah, where you got that, actually, that was a statement made by Fraser. Because I recall that conversation. And my point to Fraser was, hey, let's not be shooting from the hip. I want to know what 14 mils is asking. Or
Yeah.
What is Berthoud? What is their?
Berthoud is 13.8, and they just passed a 1 cent sales tax on top of that.
So it's not quite 12, it's 11.6. Gets you from us 19.7.
Okay.
I'm not sure I asked the question right or understood the answer right. What would it take as a mill levy for the city to continue making their 80% contribution? Is 11.6 the number?
Yeah, I would say yes.
Okay. That is.
What was the 19.7 that you?
That's the proposed
Well,
budget
they're saying,
that we provided, I believe, for 2026.
For 26.
For our share.
Molly, and when you say 11.6, that would mean nothing coming from sales tax too, right? I mean, 11.6, okay, thank you.
So hey, tell me if I'm right on the math. So you're taking the contribution of 19.7, okay, and you're just converting it to mills. So based on your total assessed value, you're applying a millage to that to come up with that calculation. Does that make sense?
So Molly, so you're saying 11 wouldn't be adequate. So,
Right.
but 13 like Berthoud has might be, right? And then Berthoud does what, 6 something for their mills for the city of Berthoud in property tax?
No, that they don't have, theirs is 100% a fire tax.
No, I know, but then in addition, so like when you
Oh.
think, okay, Thompson School District, Larimer County, I think theirs is just under 7, I think 6 something, right? So I mean, that would be an option. The city could lower its mills if the fire department had its own separate. That might be.
the city could lower its millage.
Yes, so that if so, you would take them completely out of the city budget because they would be 13 themselves. And I'm just throwing out numbers. I'm just I happen to be looking at Berthoud home sales tax and it struck me that their fire department was this, but then they had a low city of Berthoud, so,
What
property
that
tax.
is that's passing the millage over, even though you're just.
Yeah,
lowering it. You're just passing it
Exactly,
over.
it's lowering the city's mill levy and creating one. And I'm just going from memory of
Yeah.
looking at some
Okay,
property
but
tax.
I as staff can't really make that
No,
recommendation.
of course not. I'm
Yeah.
just thinking,
You can,
but you
Yeah.
would still get,
That's
the
what's-
city would get all of its sales tax. And,
Okay, let's bring the district idea.
okay,
I think what we can say is, one of the recommendations of this committee, finance committee, subcommittee meeting, was to go back to the district committee at large
Mhm.
and say, let's propose the city lowers its mills. Let's have that conversation with the group at large, because I believe that's your position.
well, I'm throwing out ideas. I'm just asking, what would that look like?
I
I do
Would
think
love to see
having
that.
guidance on that would be helpful because if the mills are not in play no matter what, then it doesn't matter if we can get around the URA idea. But if the mills are in play, then we can say, okay, is the URA idea, does it have legs at all? So then that's the second step. So
Yeah, if the mills are back on the table, Madam Commissioner, then let's bring it back to the group at large and see what they say.
Is what would be, because it's ultimately up to the voters. You can't just say we're gonna keep our 9 and add 13 for the fire. We all know that doesn't stand a chance of passing, right? And the city, because you're not funding the fire, you don't, everybody would love to keep the 9, but you could afford to reduce it because the fire's not in your bucket anymore.
We've been through this. It's exactly what we talked about as council.
Yeah.
But let's go back and we can talk about that again.
Well, there's other discussions to have here.
Well, there's the other options, right? We still have
Yeah.
expanded authority, we
Yeah.
have separation, and we have.
How much additional sales tax would it take to get the fire department what it needs? That would be astronomical, right?
Well, at 3%, let's call it, we pull in 60 million, 20 million, so 1%-ish, a little less than 1%,
We're back where
Less
we
than
were
mine.
years ago, right?
just to pay for the fire.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, without it taking any of the property tax.
Yeah, about like 0.98 would probably be equivalent to $18 million-ish.
But they need 26.
Well,
I don't
no,
think-
no.
That's the rural
Oh,
share.
okay. So that's another option than trying to go for a 1 on just the fire department, because you guys almost passed 0.37, less than how many votes was it shy?
2%.
So can we have a sales tax on 1 and mills on the other?
Well, I'm just
That's
saying.
what I'm not
or,
sure.
I
That's,
think.
that's a great question, because, I know you can't form a district that way, but can you bring somebody in the district as long as they're paying equal? That's Emily question, so. But you can't start a district from scratch that way.
That way. So a 1, get it going from 3 to 4, with the 1 going all the way to the fire is another way.
Mhm.
That's probably more palatable.
Yeah, because it would
With the
preserve that other
voters and-
leg of the stool for us.
Yeah, well, it's probably more palatable to voters.
So as a question, can we have 2 different mill levies within the district? Is that it?
Like a mill and a sales tax.
We asked that before and the answer was an adamant no. Everybody in the district has to pay the same amount on the
Well,
village side.
yeah, but the point was, is could the city, let's go back to it, the city contributes a certain millage and the remainder is paid. There's a sum that the city pays to make parity.
In the district?
Yeah.
I don't think we can do that. I mean, I could be
No,
wrong,
and that's
but
my-
if we're
that's my-
11.6, you gotta be 11.6.
Yours would come
If we
down.
form a new district, I believe that is true.
Well, yeah, the easiest way to do it is for the city to become part of the rural district. We can change the name or whatever, but whatever we form there, it has to be uniform across the board. That's what I understood the
No,
attorney.
we agreed to that. How you get there, was there a lump sum in addition to mills that the city was paying, was the question.
You mean like actually have a,
Let's just say the city gives 5 mills and then there is, wherever they get the other money, they contribute that, so there is equal contribution.
I haven't heard a question asked like that before, but my understanding was whatever the homeowner was paying in the city, the homeowner in the rural had to pay too. And I'll be very surprised if there's anything other than that.
There is
Talking to our legal group again.
And again, we're not opposed to it.
Yeah, no. We're just thinking through all the options.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there is the potential for just picking a number. Everyone would pay 8 mills, and there would also be a sales tax of 1% all across the district, right? That is, I don't know what those numbers work out. I'm just.
And I love what you're saying there, but the city needs to acknowledge the fact that rural people come into town and spend their dollars here.
But be
Where
careful
it's
with
more
that. You
palatable.
gotta be careful with that because that's geographical. Because Johnstown is part of the rural, so there is a substantial amount of sales tax there.
And they do use our roads, and if they get in a car accident, the police are gonna come, so they do use our services too. So they're paying sales tax, but they're also getting benefit of our roads and our police.
Yeah, we beat this one to death.
Okay.
A lot of.
And I'll stop.
Yeah, those are Loveland people that are over there, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
we're a community. And we have to look at this
But it would be
globally as a
district
community.
Sales tax, so it would apply not just in the city of Loveland, it would apply everywhere in the district.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay,
This
so-
is the toughest hill to climb.
Yeah.
We've agreed on that many times. Can we there are really two.
So
Well, I'm-
what are the other advantages to a district for you? More autonomy, right? You're not having, it's an easier to get to make decisions.
Sure, and I'll go down that path. If we were a district, we have autonomy. Obviously, we have to be self-sufficient. When it comes to redundancy of other services, and I'm not trying to grow an organization unnecessarily, I am trying to focus on the reduction of redundancies of what we see today. Berthoud is a prime example. You've got two administrations, HR, ITs, all of that is there. We respond to Berthoud virtually every day. They reciprocate, though. I have to be fair there. But there's opportunities there that now you don't have to have. And I'm not trying to isolate the voters, but the boards are running the fire departments. So the board basically makes the agreement and says, hey, we're at parity as far as our millage, or the higher comes down to the lower, and you can make that happen overnight with a board vote. So that's very advantageous to a certain degree. So.
In mind, we only have 6 minutes left to cover the other three. So.
Good fire.
So the other one is a revised financial formula. I think what has been talked about probably the most was the PFA model. Because everything we've done to date is PFA. Our IGAs mirror each other. They have since done a revised IGA and have a revised model from what we have as far as a model based on call volume. So.
And they have some kind of hybrid sales tax that they pay too. It's really unique.
Yeah, well, it's the hybrid sales tax actually doesn't show up. Keep Fort Collins Grade, because it's perpetuity or was voted on for perpetuity, it is now in their sales tax. But there is 1% of that that goes to public safety PFA.
Guaranteed.
Yes. So they have that extra leg of the stool in addition to their current sales tax.
Yeah, we've looked at that model. Obviously that would involve the staying in an authority. And what they do for Collins, as you know, is the city will deliver, here's what the number is for the PBA budget for the next year. And that comes from a formula that is a small percentage of sales tax and a much greater percentage of property tax. I want to say it's like 92 and 8, 92% of the property tax and 8% of their sales tax, or something on that order. So that would be something the city's going to want to look at, regardless of where we go. The city needs, first of all, to, just like any other department, say, here's what your budget is. And the second is to have some kind of predictability where when the city goes down, just like all other partners, that budget would follow. So.
But when
Yeah.
it goes up, it also follows. There's a true up, I think, at the end of the year on there.
What do you mean?
There's two true ups. There's two marks, April and August, if I'm not mistaken, where they evaluate the revenue, and they can true that up mid-budget on both sides.
That'd be something we could look at.
There's a
I think it'd be
percentage.
real helpful if you could do that, Brian, whether it's you or Andrea or someone come back to the boards and say, if we were to use their model, here's what it would do for us. Does it make sense or not?
Sure.
Yeah, and
We could do that.
And you're right. They do state that number, but there's caps. There's caps of how low it could go. And there's caps on how much of an increase.
Okay.
And one thing I would caution us all on is this is their first year of using it in practice. So it's not like it's not like they've done this for several years and we can say it works great. This is their first year they've used it. They haven't done their.
Are you talking about the true up piece?
No.
This formula.
Well, they've had this hybrid sales tax. Yes, they have.
Yeah.
Don't shake your head. No, they've had it for years and years.
The Keep Fort Collins Grade sales tax has been in there. This formula has never been done. They literally voted on.
So
it
it's
in
evolving,
September.
it's changed.
It was approved in September of last year.
Now, this is under retain the authority.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This is their
Thanks
first.
for clarifying it.
Just to be clear that we've now branched to number 2.
So to move
And they had
on.
the same challenges
And then the
we did,
next
trying to
one-
form districts, getting everybody to agree with. Takes a lot of voter involvement and, you know, we have a difficult time understanding it. Imagine trying to sell this to the
Well,
public.
that's it.
So
And
the other option
Expanded.
is the expanded authority model seeking additional contributing partners. Now, I want to say this with some constraint in the fact that this just isn't everybody throws all their money into a pot, and that's the way you operate. I think it would be hard pressed for us to basically do that. I think ultimately you look at that as the long term. So for example, you have two special districts that may be secondary or third and fourth contributors. So what does that look like? Can you start to reduce some redundancies in service, not services? Well, internal services, not to the customer, such as HR, such as administration and so forth. So is there an opportunity to have financial savings? And the one that I had referenced in a previous conversation was capital, because we literally have put capital projects basically off to the side due to our financial constraints. This could be an opportunity for us to regain some momentum on some of our capital projects collectively together. I also think it can offer a bridge of 3 to 5 years to transition to a district. So if there is more money going in the pot, you're starting to look at how you can reduce redundancies within the respective contributors. Could that be a bridge of opportunity of 3 to 5 years, then to seek voters' approval to transition to a district?
Without going into the weeds that we've tried not to go into, has those conversations, have they been made?
Yes.
Okay, and may I ask you how they went?
Yeah, I think there's more progress on one side than there is on the other. What I mean by that, both of those partners, we've had some preliminary conversation. There was some hesitation with one of the partners, but it's not off the table. I will speak very specifically to that partner that they are very interested in how can we pull some resources and reduce some redundancies to help both agencies. But a full-fledged merger, if you will, is really not the discussion at this point. So
I'm concerned about timing of all this, and I'm not saying it's a good or bad idea. This is more of a question. If this takes 3 years to 5 years to do, I'm concerned we spend a lot of time on it because we need to worry about 26 and 27, and I want to stay focused on making sure we have the finances we need the next couple of years.
yeah, and I think that's where I would lean on Brian, Molly, and Matt to how do we do this? Because I would envision it's a parallel track. Obviously, we have to have financial stability for whatever bridge period we're advocating. At the same time, these discussions need to be continuing and potentially some legal documentation being formatted so we can create a expanded authority.
Personally, I like this idea that you're talking about, and I like it a lot more than the district model. And if we try and go to the district model and do that both, I think that's going to be way overcomplicated. We're going to get away from the basics, trying to do too many things at once. I think we should focus on the authority model and then see what the reality is of being able to accomplish this other thing in the next several years before we put a whole lot of time and effort into it.
I think the district is the hardest hill to climb. And I think this is where Brian, you and Jim, and where you guys are going in regards to potential increased sales tax, whatever might be the case as far as generating additional revenue. We gotta basically make sure that these plans are cohabitating themselves, that they're supportive of what we're trying to achieve. So if you're going to go for a sales tax, if you're going to go for whatever to increase the revenue stream, we got to make sure that what we're trying to do over here is not in conflict or competition.
And I don't think Jim's gonna ask for a sales tax increase this year.
But 2026, he has referenced the potential for that. So that's where I'm advocating a bridge beyond that with this model. Go ahead.
I'm sure you've given us a lot of thought, but do we have any actual modeling showing what this will do for us financially so that we know there's certainly an advantage to putting time and effort into it?
No, but we're trying. So the first thing is to understand what level of contribution they would want to play. So each of those partners. We've said it multiple times. I don't think this is going to be any shock, but Berthoud, for example, Berthoud has the potential to, because they are a fire district, has the potential to do a full-fledged merger. They are currently at a higher millage. So coming into the authority model, we would not advocate lowering their millage. They'd stick with that millage and their sales tax. So how much of that would be contributed to the overall authority model is the conversation that needs to play out. And that would be I would think, directly proportionate to the level of services that we're combining.
With Berthoud, and needing a new, fire station 3, does that take away that need for fire station 3 just because of location? Or not?
Fire Station 3 is actually an interesting one because Fire Station 3 would be coming closer towards us. So it would be at Berthoud Parkway is what they're projecting. Right now, that's kind of like our Station 3. It's on the back burner. They don't have the finances, even with their sales tax, to get that.
Okay.
I mean, there you talk about utilization of personnel.
Yeah.
That plays a huge part. You know, we're a single battalion system, which means you got one person supervising 10 fire stations, 187 square miles. Something like that would immediately give you greater span of control, and there's literally no cost to anybody. We've come together and we said, here it is.
I think I've said this before, I'm sure I have, but it certainly worked for the Thompson School District to take Berthoud in and consolidate some of the outlying areas. And yeah, you don't need all the managers and the duplications of positions and buildings and equipment. And I think there's a lot of dollars to be saved.
Yeah. I think there's a lot more discussion at my level to basically come back to you and say, these 5 things are what they're interested in, or these 2 things.
Well, what would, if I could, Chief, one of the things that would be helpful too is the time frame. If they say, yeah, well, it sounds good in 10 years, well, then that doesn't help us solve the problem initially that we're dealing with. And if it says in 3 years, then there's some potential there. I mean, we're over time, and I'm going to ask, so one of the big takeaways I'm getting is that Mayor, that you're going to figure out what millage, if it is possible. I mean, I don't remember the exact words you used, Brian, but is it on the table again? I think that's what you said. If that in fact is the case, it's kind of a big deal finding out where council and the city wants to go with that, right?
I'll defer to the board.
Well, but
If you want to put that back on the table, go ahead.
I
Mayor,
don't think it's this board. I mean, you're talking LFRA, or you're talking.
The LFRA board, yeah, if you,
Yeah.
you don't want to say to the city, hey, I think you should put some mills on the table. We can do that again.
Here's the reality of that. I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I mean, you're exactly right. But the 3 people that are going to make the decision are all on the city side, the mayor and 2 councilors. They are the majority. You've heard what Paul and I have to say. We're speaking.
I'm not on any side here.
Well, no, I don't mean to use the word side, I guess. But I mean, we need direction from what direction that side of the table.
Well,
is
I
going
wear
for.
2 hats and several.
This is one of the problems with an authority, right?
This is exactly, I think, kind of a almost archable example of, the difficulties with the authority model.
Mhm.
Sensitive to the fact that
Yeah.
we're over time, I also want to say, I hope I didn't come across as, hey, I don't want the commissioners here. That wasn't, what I
No,
meant to say. I said, once we open this, and as you'll notice, this really just became a big Q&A session for the board. We got very little done. I was able to ask very few of my direct questions of the staff, so we could proceed on the staff level and really come out with ideas to then inform the board so you can decide on them. Instead, this was the board in the kitchen making the recipe, which I respect and I've learned a lot from all of you. But that's why we formed the subcommittees. So please forgive me at the beginning when I was like, hey, this is a board meeting now. And with board meetings, it just becomes a lot of Q&A for board members, which I think you guys learned a lot, which is great. But we got 0 done. So I'd like to have a finance subcommittee meeting where we can, talk turkey, talk about the formulas, talk about the numbers, talk about what we've learned from Fort Collins, things like that. And then, again, bring more information back to the board at large. So I just wanted to explain my concerns at the beginning and why I felt it necessary to call Jim because, it's just, like I said, this was an LFRA board meeting, which is fine, but it's not what it was intended to be.
if I could, Christie, I don't mean to put you on the spot. If I could you please inform us who are on those subcommittees? So we've got it in front of us.
100%.
Who are on the subcommittee, different steering committees, if I could.
So for the legal work group, we have the chief, Emily, Linda, Vince are the primaries. The backups, I'm not sure who Vince's backup would be. And-
Per Jim, he told me that Dylan and Dalton weren't those backups. He never named anybody else. But that was per Jim. That's why there wasn't an alternate listed on that revised list.
I have a line item in there for bond counsel when we get to that stage. For the finance work group, I have the chief, Andrea Smith, Brian, Paul, Mayor Marsh, Ben from the JVG, and then we
had Tom on there. Tom is from FRAC. So he's a civilian representation, and then we had a union representative.
Yep, so then we
Correct.
could also have staff. And then Emily as well.
Did that make sense?
So the lawyer? No, the rural,
Emily Powell, LFRA's legal counsel.
then that makes it a legal committee and then we have to have an attorney.
We don't have anybody else.
That's the rule. We can't be in the room with an attorney for one party and not an attorney for the other.
Yeah.
And I think it's
hard and fast rule.
I think it's simple enough that it's not going anywhere. The finance group comes to basically has a conversation and it has to go to the next level. So that's perfectly fine. Here's what I would say. These are the committees and that's what they need to be, or the subgroups. We can't forward invites to anybody. That has to be it. Because we run into the same situation.
Okay.
Brian, I'm staring at the
Hey,
forwarded
I'm letting it
email
go.
from you.
We can just keep it moving.
I'm staring at the email from you that you forwarded to Jim and Vince.
This conversation's over. We're not doing this right now. So that's fine.
Here, let's bring this back on the track. So we've got the list of people who are supposed to be in these subcommittees, correct? Would you agree to those, the list that Christie just gave us?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're good with that, with the exception of the attorney issue that you pointed out.
There'd
That
be an
would
issue
be
if one side had a lawyer.
Okay, so that being said, I'm sorry, Christie,
No, you're fine.
could you email that to the people on that subcommittee so it's very clear to me, because I get lost in the weeds on this sometimes, of
Yes.
who's supposed to be where, so that we don't have this problem again?
May I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So Emily is LFRA's attorney. She is not the rural district's attorney. So she's an impartial attorney. She's not here to represent either side. So that was why we asked her to be here, because she has a history, experience
Sure.
in doing these, and she might be able to help answer questions. So I guess my question is, since there's no rural representation,
Does that trigger the need for another attorney?
right, yeah.
That'd be a great question for an attorney. I don't know.
Appreciate
But I
it.
do know this, they have told me if there's ever another lawyer in the room, you walk out, call us, and either that attorney has to leave or our attorney will come. And I've seen it happen in meetings and other attorneys have gone, oh, of course, I understand, and they leave the meeting. So, but to your point, if it's Emily, I don't know, ask Vince.
Okay,
I really
that's what I
don't know.
was
It's a
gonna
great
say. Should I ask Vince about that?
Definitely,
Okay.
great question, but I don't know.
Yes.
Emily's really good about it, by the way, in terms
You
of
would know too.
representing the authority. I've asked her questions. She'll say, no, you gotta go back and ask that to Linda on the district side. I think she's very impartial and looks out for the authority.
So I will email this list out to
Please.
the different people on.
Thank you.
Yep.
With the secondaries, right?
I can copy them.
Secondaries on the list, like.
Oh, yeah. It has a primary list and a alternate list. Mhm.
Thank you.
So is it alternate or are we bringing primaries and secondaries?
I don't know, I could have never in 1,000 years pictured this becoming such an issue. I would like to have my backup at the meetings for the reasons Molly stated earlier.
And I certainly don't need to be here. I'm the alternate. I came just in case.
You
Paul has another meeting, I'm just kidding, whatever. But
That's all I'm saying, and I want to be very clear about this. Molly is not the forum. When you say primaries and secondaries can come, this is what you generate. This is what you generate.
I don't take that personally, what you
No,
said.
I'm just being honest. I'm not.
Maybe we
I'm
need to
serious.
make a
This is very
distinction
frustrating.
between board members and non-board
Well, I
members.
think that's-
Secondary to
That was
include
our
board members.
assumption.
Yeah, if you're on the board,
Non-board.
Yeah,
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 that makes sense.
yeah. So it wasn't my intention to create
no,
a
no.
problem here. I just
No, I.
more
you
wanted
didn't
to
create a
hear
problem.
what's being said.
No, it was just scheduling where it became this thing. Well, if Molly comes, then we're gonna have to have another person in there, like it was some kind of game of dodgeball or something, but.
You know, hey, I have a life away from here. There's great things I could be home doing right now.
It's whether you bet.
No.
All right, so I appreciate us talking about that. And then, the last thing we didn't get to was the fourth bullet point there, which City Manager Thompson wanted to make sure we had on there, which was, there's always the separation option where the LFRA becomes a department. And then the rural would have its own fire district protection operation. But he wanted me to make sure that was on.
I'm sure the public would love to hear that. They'll love to hear that one. They will hear it.
The public meetings.
Yep, exactly.
Do we want to discuss that? Are we buttoning this up?
I have no interest in
Well,
that topic.
Yeah, I don't either. Now, I'll say this, we've worked together great for 60 years, close to it. And it's only been the last couple of years that this has become an issue, and part of the people that have made it an issue are no longer here. We've always had a sense of community. We've had a great partnership, and we should do everything we can to make it work. But understand this, the city will be hurting big time, as will the rural district if we were to get a divorce. We don't have to contract with the city. I'm not telling you anything you probably don't know. We can contract with Berthoud, we can contract with Johnstown, the rural district could have 3 or 4 different IGAs out there. That's not our intent. We've had a good thing going here for many years. Kind of breaks my heart to hear that even suggested. I mean, it's like almost, and I know you don't mean it this way, it's almost like a threat. Well, we don't feel threatened by it because we know the community will stand behind us, both the citizens in the city and the rural both, because we have had a great partnership with a sense of community. And as leaders in this community, Brian, we need to find a way to make it work.
Terrific. Again, this is why, this being a board meeting becomes very difficult because, again, I at staff level put that on there as I was instructed to, but then it becomes a board topic. And with the reactions and stuff like that, if it had just been staff, we could say, okay, put that on the list, what would it look like? But it becomes a negotiation and a discussion of the history and the stuff like that. So I certainly understand that. I was just doing my job.
I understand that. I just wanted to respond to it.
Oh, 100%. I wish.
And hopefully, what we don't want to be is defensive here.
Of course.
Yeah, I think it needs to be looked at.
Yeah, this really should have been a board meeting. Jim should have been here.
Well, it was a board meeting. He couldn't have been here. He
Unfortunately-
chose not to be.
You don't want to be, yeah, but it really puts us staff in a really tough spot.
Well, I think you guys handled it well.
Thank you.
Seriously, you guys didn't say anything that was not brought up prior, so we're good.
Thank you.
Right. With that, we'll fund it up at 45. Thank you. Troy, Matt, Sarah, thank you.
A whole hour?
I got an hour to kill. Yeah.
Wow.
Go get yourself some freeze-dried candy down.
Yeah, I'm pretty-